mit mir ist es aus. Ich kam heute nach Haus und machte Licht. Ich suchte meine kleine Frau und fand sie nicht weg. Sie war einfach weg. Ich bekam einen Schreck, denn sie fuhr zur Mama und ich sitze da. Annabell, ach bitte komm doch schnell, so schreibe ich täglich, denn das Leben, Annabell, ist nur mit dir erträglich. Kleider, Hüte, Pelze und Juwelen will ich schenken, immer nett und zärtlich sein und niemals dich mehr kränken.
This was my first encounter with tires that had to be built in layers. 5 pieces for each tire plus 3 more for each rim. There was way less cleaning up to do than I thought. Building these wheels was big fun. I enjoyed it as much as I enjoy building dragging magic tracks. I marked the wheels with a V, vorne, for the front wheels and an H, hinten, for the rear wheels. Then I sanded all 4 tires flat on one spot to give them a weighted look on the dio. You can see it on the standing wheels. In my opinion, this looks more realistic than the perfect round shape. The paint job on the wheels started with priming the rims in a rust color that looks like the original German primer. I did this because I hadn't made my mind up on the chipping I wanted to do. Then I painted the rims dark blue in 3 thin layers. A heavily diluted acrylic wash followed. After that I painted the hubcaps and put on 3 thin layers of a silk clear coat. A perfect paint job wasn't required, and I'll show you why in a second. Next step was to apply the decals to the hubcaps. Although the decals were thin, they needed some Mr. Mark Softer and Mr. Mark Setter to lay down properly on the rounded hubcaps. The hubcaps were gloss coated after the decals had settled. Only the car's exterior will be painted Panzer Grey because it's a confiscated car. To show that, I put on some small spots of mascot to do the chipping. A little bit of dark blue and chrome will be visible later. Then the complete wheels were painted grey. You'll have to wait for the next episode for the following steps. The engine was also primed with that rust color, because on the engine of the actual car you can see that primer too.
Heute endlich kommst du an, Annabell, ach bitte komm doch schnell, so schreib ich täglich, mach mein Leben sonnenhell, geliebte Annabell.
Then the engine and transmission were painted flat black. The paint was diluted to allow the rust color to shine through a bit. The distributor was painted with the rust color again. More engine painting in my next update. Then it was time to continue with the trunk. After sanding it smooth, I masked all gluing areas. I don't like scraping off paint that shouldn't be in these areas in the first place. Then I primed the trunk in the trusty dusty rusty rust color and put on some mascal in selected spots. I want to show how soldiers ruin a nice paint job when they load the trunk with heavy stuff that leaves scratches. Then the trunk was painted dark blue. I came across a problem I wouldn't have expected. The life color paint didn't want to stick properly and didn't settle level as it usually does. Harry Houdini explained it to me. You need an acrylic primer. I'll go on using the enamel primer. An acrylic flat clear coat will be painted on top of it before I use the dark blue. Next I used the same acrylic wash I used on the hubcaps and sealed everything with the same silk clear coat. If you ask why I didn't use a gloss coat, here's my answer. For my taste, the gloss coat is too shiny if the rest of the car is painted with flat paints. Gloss clear looks out of scale. Again, a matter of personal preference and the way everybody sees colors differently. For the way I want the chipping to look like, the mascal method is just perfect. Around the chipped spots you find real riches. Of course it's a matter of personal taste, but I'm glad that I discovered this for me when I watched vids of McLean 187 and Alex modeling. The chips are a bit too large, but some of them will be covered with stuff I'll put into the trunk. To add some variation to the strong rust color, I used a brown paint that I put on sparingly onto the primer. Then I sealed these areas with a flat clear coat. A pin wash with 2 of my homemade washes followed. I used a medium brown and a dark wash. I overlooked this spot when I removed the mascal, but thanks to the pig I noticed it. The interior portion of the body was painted the same way too, but I didn't do any chipping here because it wouldn't be visible. Time for some scratch building. I showed the doors on the right hand side open, so there should be hinges. First thing to do was adding some styrene to make the C-column look realistic. I used 3 layers of 0.5mm styrene sheet on both sides. To represent the hinges I used a short piece of 1mm copper wire. Since I didn't have a reference pic of the actual car, I used a artistic license again. In the meantime, the top corner received a tiny piece of styrene to cover the wire. You'll see that in my next update video. Frame and the actuator from scratch. No reference pics, so I built it the way I imagined it might look like. The interior side was painted the same way as the trunk's interior, but I forgot to put on some mascal. The detail painting of the actuator took care of that. I masked the areas next to the actuator and painted it aluminum. After peeling off the tape, some paint was ripped off. At first I really got mad, but actually that happy accident made for the chipping I forgot. I painted them in rust color and will do the same steps I did on the trunk. First off, I want to make clear that none of the things I did here are necessary to build a nice model. In my opinion, ICM didn't do the best job on details, but that's just me. For example, these ropes and the light were missing. Let's start with the ropes. These knobs were missing, so I made them from sprue. I've got a lot of different threads I can use for adding ropes, but in this case they were either too thick or too thin. In the end I used silicone thread for the loops and the thick rope. It's a bit out of scale, but in my opinion it looks nice enough. For the light I used pieces of 0.5 and 0.2mm styrene sheet. While I was dry fitting the front seat, I asked myself, where the hell do the rear passengers put their feet? There isn't much space. Thanks to this pic I found the answer to that question, and I can't understand how ICM could have missed this detail. So I cut up this portion of the front seat and rebuilt it from scratch. Some filling and sanding had to be done too, especially along the left and right vertical edges. I used a mixture of Revell Contactor liquid and Revell Plasto Putty for the larger gaps. For the tiny gaps I used CA glue.
Denn ich möchte einmal recht so von Herzen glücklich sein. Irgendwo auf der Welt fängt der Weg zum Himmel an. Irgendwo, irgendwie, irgendwann.
step was masking the gluing areas for the front seat. That's ready for painting now. I doubt that the soldiers would have left the carpet on the floor. It would be ruined by mud, dirt and moisture in no time. The floor will also be painted dark blue. I painted the seats in a medium brown color. I found a missing detail when I looked at this picture. That thing in the middle between the ropes wasn't there. I used a sharpened screwdriver to outline it. Maybe you don't find that in modern cars anymore, but all old cars had it. I almost forgot to show you this. On the rear lower corner of the rear seats there are triangular holes. These had to be closed in order to show open doors.
Irgendwo auf der Welt fängt der Weg zum Himmel an. Irgendwo, irgendwie, irgendwann.
Du hast die schönste Nase, du hast den schönsten Mund, doch das ist zur Ekstase.
A couple of pics of the primed seats. They received several layers of silk clear prior to the use of oils to make them look like one leather.
Worin verliebt ich bin, doch ich bin jetzt ganz ehrlich und erklär, das wäre alles nichts, wenn eins nicht wäre. Ich bin ganz verschossen in deine Sommersprossen, die kleinen und die großen sind meine Freund. Ich schau unverdrossen auf dein...
The interior door panels come in two parts for each side. The exterior panels come in one part, but cutting them in two is simple. I did that for both sides, although the doors on the driver's side will be closed. I glued the parts for the left-hand side together and filled the gaps for the clear parts. Then I added the trim, but silly me made a mistake. I'll have to remove some of the trim on the front door where the small triangular window sits. Not too much of a deal, but work I could have avoided.
Doch macht das im Dunkel, sonst merkt's vielleicht die Tigerin und sieht ihre Tupfen. So ist halb verrückt, sein Herz.
For adding the hinges, I had to change the door panels in some smaller areas.
Gesprungen wie gehupft, doch lange nicht gestreift, so wie getupft. Ich bin ganz verschossen in deine Sommersprossen, die kleinen und die großen sind meine Freund. Ich schau unverdrossen auf deine Sommersprossen.
For the rear hinges I used 0.6mm copper wire I had heated in a flame and squeezed with a pair of flat pliers. The missing bits were rebuilt with styrene sheet.
Ein neuer Sprössling sein, hab ins Herz geschlossen, nur deine Sommersprossen, die kleinen und die großen.
To reshape the panel lines I used a sharpened screwdriver and punched them in carefully. Difficult to make out, but you'll see it in my next update when this is painted.
Wie Marzipan, doch ich gehe fast zugrund daran. Ich war ganz verschossen in dein...
The front door panel needed a part that's called Türbremse in German. That translates into door brake and it prevents the door from being opened too wide and causing damage on the paint and dents. I used several screwdrivers and a steel tube to shape the white styrene part. The door brake itself was made from the flattened copper wire I used for the rear hinges. It isn't glued to the styrene because it must remain movable till I glue the door into place.
Hab ins Herz geschlossen, nur deine Sommersprossen, die kleinen und die großen, jetzt sind sie weg.
That's it for now. The next update will follow soon.